Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
At Capella University, you can learn at your own pace with our FlexPath learning format. Take 1 or 2 courses at a time and complete as many as you can in a 12-week billing session. With FlexPath, you can finish the bachelor's degree you started in 19 months and under $19,000. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu. Fastest 25% of students. Cost varies by pace, transfer credits, and other factors. Fees apply.
Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to the podcast. And I'm really happy to welcome Tamara Adlin from Seattle, Washington. And she is a startup whisperer. She is a UX innovator. She's written books, and really happy to have her on to discuss her work. Tamara, welcome.
Thank you. And just so you know, my name is Tamara like camera.
Thank you for that. And introduce yourself, and we'll dive into the questions.
Sure. I came up through the world of user experience, which is a field in software design that's focused on how do you make software easier to use. And I worked at Amazon for a little while. I wrote some books, and then I went out on my own, and I've been consulting for early stage startups and companies that want to behave more like startups for almost 25 years. And I got really fascinated with the idea of aligning teams and aligning executives to create great products. And so I'm working on another book and doing some coaching and consulting and enjoying life here in Seattle.
Yeah, what a fantastic introduction. And so I love starting off because this is a business entrepreneurship podcast showcasing brands and businesses. What do clients come to you for? Either they're trying to achieve or they're frustrated, fed up with. What is your client avatar?
It's funny you say avatar because the books I wrote are on personas, which is a similar idea. Actually, it's a really interesting answer. It's a really interesting question to answer right at this moment, because with Techmageddon happened in terms of software jobs and early stage jobs and tech jobs in general. And it used to be that companies were actively looking for help with all sorts of things. Now, companies are leaning more towards solving things in-house and trying to find AI to solve a bunch of problems. And the reason I bring that up is because as you are a consultant and over the years, you have to redefine yourself at least once every 5 years. And I'm in another redefining period where I'm trying to identify, I know what I can do and what I can solve. I don't know exactly how my clients describe those problems, because it's not as concrete as I'll design 4 wireframes or I'll change a script or something like that. It's more about how can I help your entire team get unstuck and work faster and better towards a product that people are actually going to be happy to pay for. So I haven't really changed, but the demand channel has changed and they're looking for something different. They're defining the problem differently. And I am in the midst of figuring out which of the problems they're talking about today I can address.
Yeah, I really love that. And so we'll dive into the questions. I love this idea. You have executive alignment and 5 conversations and getting everyone on the same page without getting fired. Elaborate on that.
I won't go on too long about it, but in the early 2000s, I wrote 2 books on personas. And the idea behind personas is that you create a fake person to design something for, so that instead of saying, we're designing this for women age 30 to 45 who are getting back into the workforce after 2 years of unemployment, you say it's Mary, and you describe Mary, and people can empathize with Mary. And it's a better way to convey data and information about what users want and need. That should have worked really well. It didn't. And because of that, I got interested in why isn't this method that makes so much sense working? And I started swimming upstream, which is what people in my field have done for a long time, which is trying to get earlier and earlier to figure out where the source is of the confusion. And I found the source of the confusion in the C-suite, that partly because I specialized for such a long time in early stage startups. That's who you end up working with, and bigger companies trying to be innovative. So they're trying to do something in a new way. And what I found is the most easy way to explain it is an analogy, the tornadoes analogy. So in my field and in any software or product field, people who are professionals in that area, it's like building a house. We use that analogy all the time. And what we end up doing as professionals as we grow and become more senior is that we focus more and more on getting better and better at building the house. We learn how to manage general contractors. We figure out the best places for supplies. We learn to deal with it when it starts to drizzle, all the things, but really focused on being right in that plot of land and building that house, which is great unless a tornado comes through. And what I started getting interested in is the kind of things that can ruin projects, no matter how good you become at your jobs. And I've nicknamed that tornadoes. And it's the analogy is you may be immortal building a house, but there's the Greek gods up on the hill. And if they fight, then tornadoes or lightning bolts can come down and destroy everything, no matter how great of a house builder you are. And I think in our professional lives, we either decide that's an impossible problem to solve and it's above my pay grade, or we realize, hey, maybe I should see if there's some way that I can calm the tornadoes down. And that's where my focus started to be, is how do we help the people making the hard decisions make decisions that they can stick with? What's keeping them from choosing a direction and sticking with it? Why are they coming in 6 weeks after the project started and saying this is all wrong? And that led to the next iteration of personas, which is actually creating these fake people in collaboration with executives or stakeholders, not based on hard data with bullet points, but getting them to express who they think we're building this for and what those people want and need, in a way that we create little fake people and we prioritize them. And that new conversation tends to be a great tornado preventative measure.
And speaking of tornadoes, you talk about project tornadoes and ensuring that products aren't ruined by politics and chaos. And I'm sure the the viewers and listeners would love to hear about that.
Sure. I think it's basically what I just said. And I think that what I've done is I've created this workshop that pretty much anybody can do, and it's nicknamed the Executive Alignment or Alignment Personas in 5 Conversations. And I always advise that people start small, and they just start within their own team and don't try to do anything too important. Just start small and try it out. And if this method works, it ends up allowing your team to produce something slightly better than what everybody expected. And then everybody gets curious about why. So the process is to sit down. And the first question is, what are our measurable goals with respect to this project we're working on right now? And my philosophy behind goals is that they're always important and never exist, because goals are slippery and because executives change their minds. And that's just the way it is. But we all assume executives have clear goals, but they don't. So the kind of goals I'm looking for are increase or decrease some number by some amount in some time period. And I simplify it down so that we're not talking about the difference between OKRs or SLAs or any of that stuff, where I just say, here's my little Mad Libs. That's a harder conversation than you think it's going to be. They always say we have them and they never do. The second conversation is getting them all to shout out the words that they use when they describe users. Is it teachers? Is it innovators? Is it account holders? Is it lapsed? And you get all those words out on the table. And then you go one step further and describe them on yellow stickies, something like a mom who wants to do yoga but has no time, or an athlete who has an injury. Then the third conversation is wants and needs. You cluster those descriptions under pink stickies that start with the words I want or I need. And then out of the wants and needs, the fourth conversation is creating these candidate personas like Ian Inspo Seeker or Quinn Quick Hit. And then the fifth conversation is where the magic really happens. You loop back around and you say, if our primary goal is reducing subscription cancellations, by 80% within the 6 months of relaunch. And we don't make Trey Trend Hunter ridiculously happy. What on earth are we doing? And I call that the magic sentence. It's a magic sentence because it's an agreed on finish line with a number in it, not just increase, but 80%. And it says all of those personas are important. All of those needs are important. But there's a certain set of wants and needs we have to nail it for if we want to get people to stop canceling their subscriptions. And that has a truly magical impact downstream as well, because decision makers tend to stick with those decisions, and it doesn't become a pissing contest of who's more important. If an exec comes in and says, we need to make the logo bigger, anyone on the team can say, how is that going to help Trey Trend Hunter? And so I've just found really great results from this. It's tricky, it's political, but it's also like the purpose of having a process like this is saying, we're using this process this woman wrote a book about and blaming it on me.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku. And it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Yeah, I really love that response and your passion and your enthusiasm. One thing that is interesting, because you've worked with a lot of the top tech companies and a lot of times with startups and leadership teams and C-suite, it's just chaos. And you talk about unclustering startup leadership team, and you've got insights and war stories from a therapist at a startup C-suite.
Yeah, I'm a C-suite therapist. Yeah. And that's the topic of Corporate Underpants, which is my own podcast of these stories about how there's this old sort of law, a theoretical law called Conway's law, which is that when you build a product or any kind of thing for people, it inevitably reflects the communication patterns that are part of the team that built it. That's Conway's law. I call that Corporate Underpants, which basically says that anytime you launch a product, organizational or communication issues show up on the user interface like underwear on the outside of an outfit. And I do have lots and lots of stories about this. I think when you repeat something over and over again I counted it up at one point because I've been a consultant for 25 years and I'm like, oh my God, I've been on 85 teams. And it put this in perspective. I was like, oh, I'm seeing some patterns here because I've done this so many times and seen over and over again that everybody thinks everyone else is clear and on the same page. It's not safe if you're a senior person to say, I don't know what our goals are. But everybody feels like they missed that meeting and no one will admit it, which fascinates me. So then the question isn't, how do we say that to them? It's how do we bring up that question in a way where they can safely show their disagreements to each other. So for example, I said earlier, decrease subscription cancellations by 80%. That conversation, first of all, they have to agree that decreasing subscription cancellations itself is an interesting thing to do. Then they have to decide, is it 80% or 8%? They do not have answers to those questions out of the gate. And if they do have answers, they're at the corporate or organizational level. They're not at the project you're working on right now, the redesign of the homepage or whatever it is. They're not at that level. So shifting all of these questions a little bit so that it seems like a reasonable thing to ask. And it seems like a an obvious thing that they don't agree instead of assuming they do agree, somehow enables them to get all of this out in the open. And then you can clean it up. Only when you know what's going on in their minds can you change their minds.
And a corollary to that is, what do you mean by, it sounds like you teach clients how to avoid launching an org chart, and what do you call an org chart? The corporate underpants.
Because and there's articles on this too. One great example is somebody said, if you sit in a car, you can tell if the steering wheel team hated the dashboard team. It's that kind of thing where if we have silos of jobs and silos of responsibilities, then even if we each do our best work, the results can conflict with each other because our users or our customers see us as one thing, one company, one product, one experience, one marketing message that should turn into a product story, one thing. But we're structured as many little things, almost inevitably. Saying it's the underwear on the outside of it's like the visible panty lines of corporate products is saying that if you can tell that the steering wheel team hated the dashboard team, then there's something wrong. But it's admitting that happens all the time, right? And so it creates these sort of choppy, just like seeing somebody's underwear through their clothes makes you think of their outfit differently. I shouldn't be seeing this. This doesn't make this is not what I should be seeing, but I am seeing it. And I don't think we admit that enough and see it as inevitable. I do think it's inevitable. I call it corporate underpants. Conway's law was, I think, in the 60s. It's just when you think about it, you're like, oh, obviously. So that's why it's interesting to me.
Yeah, it's funny. And then along those same lines, I find this conversation very intriguing. And you talk about why so many products are horrible, even though we all know the right way to build them. And
yes. Yeah. Listen, in my field, in software user experience design, it's existed for a few decades now, and we know all of the methods to do it right. So it's the same thing as back to the house building analogy. There are ways that are the best ways to build a house. There's some slight variations on them or whatever, but we know the best way to build a house. Just because we know the best way to build it doesn't mean that process is always going to happen that way or is infallible. If we know the best ways to do things, why do those projects still get clobbered? And that comes back to the tornado thing, that we can do all of our best work in the best possible way with the best possible collaboration with the team. But there are problems of another order of magnitude that are at a totally different scale. A tornado is a totally different scale than a problem with getting in touch with a general contractor at the right time. Right. And it feels completely out of reach. It feels inevitable. It feels above your pay grade, all of those things that I said before. But what if it was just another design challenge? What if it was just another, like, who are these people in the C-suite? What are my assumptions about them? And what's right and wrong about that? And how can I help them give me what I really need, which is clear answers to some really stupid basic questions. What exactly are we building? Who exactly is that for? What problems does it solve for those people? And how are we different than anybody else building something like this? You'd think that those questions would be too stupid to even mention at this point in software design history. But I will go out on a limb and tell you 95% of teams out there cannot answer those clearly for the project they're working on right this minute.
Interesting. And to tie things off, I was listening to this interview with Vlad Tenev from Robinhood, and he was talking about how he was designing a mobile first. And how does your principles differ from designing mobile applications versus desktop versus like physical, like you were talking about, like a steering wheel and dashboard? How do these principles remain the same, or do you have to adapt between different interfaces?
Okay, the principles remain the same, which is, who are we building this for? What are those people trying to do? What are the problems we're trying to solve? And how are we different than our competitors? It just ends up being a different set of, it's acrylic paints versus oil paints. It's building a mobile home versus building a mansion. It's just different tools, right? And it's different supplies and things like that. to me, the core question comes back to that question about what problems are we trying to solve. Then you can use all of your different crayons or oil paints or whatever to create a mobile app or a desktop app or whatever else. So to me, I think the Robinhood example is interesting for another reason, but creating a mobile first app was something that people talked a lot about 10 years ago. And that was saying, we have to stop designing for the desktop first because more people are on their mobile devices first, meaning they walk around all day and interact with these things versus sitting around all day and interact with their computers. If that's the case, then we need to stop taking these big designs and trying to smallify them. Instead, we need to start with a small design, make the best possible small design for this form factor with these kinds of buttons, and then we can make the bigger one. So you make the smaller one first, then the bigger one, versus making the bigger one first and trying to squish it into a smaller one. Now, Robinhood is an interesting example because they had a case probably a couple of years ago where someone committed suicide because they looked at their Robinhood UI and then they thought they were hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt because that UI was stuck in a strange state where it was saying that there was this debt, but only for about an hour because of the way things were processing on the back end. He was experimenting with, and this is a person who probably was experimenting with hundreds of dollars, maybe $1,000, and was seeing a screen that said he was $250,000 in debt. And before he got clarity on that, he couldn't stand living anymore. To me, looking at all these cases and understanding that we have a responsibility, especially if we're doing something health related or money related or in the crypto space or whatever, we have a responsibility for the experiences that we put out there. And we have to look at every single one of them to make sure that we're not possibly putting someone into a state where they could feel that their lives are over, right? So to me, that's about where do you spend your time and energy? And I think they missed that one, which is a different question. It's how do you make sure that you take the time to go through every edge case? And I think if you're a stock trading platform, you have to.
Fascinating. If people wanted to connect with you and learn from you and check out your work, how could they do that?
I have my website, adlininc.com, ADLININC. I am the only Tamara Adlin on LinkedIn, and I do a lot of posting there. And I also host Corporate Underpants, my own podcast. And I'm also heavily involved in something called Never Search Alone, which is a network for people who are job searching. It's a big free network to help people who are searching for jobs. So LinkedIn is probably a great way to start, and I'd love to see you there.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on and providing so much value. And I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. It's been great talking to you.